Good morning, Shubha. Before starting to talk a little bit about the theme of our 2 days of practice together here, it's like reflective meditations in the Thai forest tradition. I wanted to introduce Ajahn Rochano from Nepal, Wat Banana Chat in Thailand. He's ordained in the same period as myself. Like we both started about 20 plus years ago with Ajahn Jayasaro at Wat Banana Chat, and have stuck it out ever since. And Ajahn Rochano has been living in Buddha Bodhivana for a long period. I think how many years? 4 years, on and off, plus more. Yeah, in Melbourne, in Australia, and came back to Thailand just this year, at the beginning of the year, and then of course introduce Samanera Mahapanyo, a gift from the group of Delhi, before called Arpan. Okay, so we've come here today after having spent some time in Bodh Gaya together with Dr. Dar and some members of our group. So feel thoroughly inspired by being in India, in Delhi now, just contemplating while sitting here that even though we associate with Delhi, that it is a big city, modern, high-tech, we do the Buddha having lived in this part of the world and possibly having taught in this area as well, just like we know the area around in Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, where we're very sure that there's very clear, significant places where the Lord Buddha gave his teachings. We're also sure that he must have passed through and taught in this area, in Delhi, Kuruka Padesha. So happy to be able to explore this and in the following days as well, like after the weekend. So myself and Ajahn Rochano and Samani Mahapanyo, we consider ourselves also on part of a pilgrimage. So these 2 days of talking, exchanging of Dhamma, exchanging of practice are integrated in something that's much more big and important to everyone personally, is the sense of exploring the Dhamma in a way that affects our own heart, our own life, and to keep that spirit alive, that the teachings of the Buddha, they are present, they're not something from ancient days, not something that has been forgotten and is outdated, but they're santitiko, apparent here and now, and they're timeless, kaliko. So these reflections, I feel, are very important to always come back to the sense of what is the meaning of our practice, what are we doing, helping us to motivate ourselves, coming back to a fresh sense of inspiration through the teachings of the Dhamma and through the person of the Buddha as a historical person and also as a supreme teacher, and the Sangha, all the venerable noble ones that have practiced in the footsteps of the Lord Buddha. Translate later? Or?
Yeah, will you talk together?
Okay. So we started this morning by chanting and recollecting the virtues of Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha in the way we do it in our monastery and Wat Banana chant in Pali, in a certain accent of that the Western Sangha has developed in the Thai context. I'm sure you'll have your own little way of phrasing things, and particularly when you do the Bali Hindi translation or just only the Pali. So, but important is that we have a sense of reflection guiding us in meditation, because it is very easy to fall away from a path that would lead to wisdom and enlightenment. Even with meditation, it can easily come up that people get say carried away in certain ways of being, living, and focusing their mind, and not integrating that which is essential that the Buddha pointed out. So this is one of the benefits, I think, of the reflection that we do consciously. And I would like to mention that I feel Luang Por Chah and the whole tradition that we are in has been very much emphasizing a sense of right view, samadhi, which means, of course, right view ultimately means the understanding, penetration of the Four Noble Truths, which is a very high insight. But intermediately, it means many things. Like, for example, the right conduct in daily life, and the way of approaching the Dhamma, the way we learn the Dhamma, the way we practice, that it is guided by a sense of correct reflection. And we're not there at the finished product of right view, but we're teaching ourselves right view by our way of practice. And so I think in Wat Pa Pong, Luang Por Chah's monastery, and Wat Banana chant, there is a sense of reiterating or coming back to the same core teachings that are essential teachings of the Lord Buddha, through the practice of reciting the teachings, where the part of the Sangha that is say, like traditionally forest dwellers, as you know, like we're living in a forest monastery, and it's very simple actually in the way we have like little kutis, dwellings where there's not really a desk and a lamp and a bookshelf, except for maybe some theras that do teachings, and sometimes like little things that we can't do without, for example, a chanting book or so. But like we're actually not study monks. We're part of the Aranyavasi, part of the forest dwellers, and not the Gamavasi, the city dwellers, which traditionally, particularly in Thailand, have a teaching function and a function of studying the teachings, studying the Pariyatti Dhamma, the Dhamma of the scriptures, like as it is said now. But it means like the word of the Buddha actually in its details, in its meanings, in the precise interpretations, which of course there's a very rich tradition all over Asia in that area, not only in Southeast Asia and Burma and Thailand, or like in Southern Asia, like in Sri Lanka and or in India itself, where in fact many Thai bhikkhus go to study at Varanasi in a university there, in order to understand the deeper roots of the language, and be able to translate and get the historical context of how the Buddha's teachings evolved over time. But we're actually the Patipatti tradition, we're the tradition of like practicing it. And so we live with this two sides, like we have to be informing ourselves well enough that our practice off track, at the same time not lose ourselves in intellectual empty knowledge of the letter of the words of the Buddha, but always try to penetrate to the spirit of the words of the Buddha. And I think Ajahn Chah himself, he through his practice and through the reflectivity on the teachings, as the essential teachings are very, very concise actually, as he kept those alive and integrated them into his practice, I think he was able to find a very good way between those two elements of like knowledge and they say understanding from the texts and from the theory, from the Pariyatti Dhamma and the Patibatti Dhamma. And I would say that the way Ajahn Chah approached the practice was coming from a very integrative way of seeing things, very inclusive. And you can see it's in one way very open. At the same time, it is very traditional, because I think he always uses the same principles of Dhamma to come back to, for example, the Four Noble Truths, which we know also Longpo Sumedho, his main Western disciple, emphasizes so much the Four Noble Truths as the key reflection of our practice, to see dukkha and to understand dukkha and to penetrate to dukkha, suffering, and be able to then see the causes of dukkha, understand the causes and how it comes to be, what causes dukkha, what is it that causes dukkha, and then be able to abandon it to whatever level we are able to, in small parts and bigger parts, in areas where we're sitting on the cushion or in areas where we're walking around doing our daily activities, to be able to let go of the causes of dukkha, and then to constantly have that sense of being uplifted in a spirit of knowing, understanding, seeing, or like the awakening to the penetration of into the truths around dukkha. And the Noble Eightfold Path is very all-encompassing, as we know, like sila, samadhi, panya, or the 8 factors, starting with things that we practice many times on the level of daily life, ethical conduct, morality, for example, doing things that are wholesome, integrating those in our practice, and then working with a still mind, a focused mind, a mind that is like not actively reaching out, but going inwards, samadhi, and then panya, as I mentioned, the reflectivity, wisdom, the understanding, and the coming to the cause and root of the truths. So I think Longpo Chah had a sense of always going back to the Four Noble Truths, and similarly other great forest teachers, for example Luang Pu Man, and even also Longtam Mahabua, when some of the contemporary teachers of the tradition in Thailand, we can be very, very sure that a teacher teaches correct things when there's always a reference to these core teachings, the Four Noble Truths. If the Four Noble Truths barely get mentioned or never get mentioned, and then all there is rites and rituals, or like say miracle stories or fascinating things that are beyond our daily life, but otherworldly and fascinating and maybe inspiring in one way, then we have to ask, where do the Four Noble Truths come in there? So this is one quality guarantee, so to say, the QC control is the Four Noble Truths in a teacher's teaching. So, and another, say, very, very equivalent way of approaching is the 3 characteristics we know: anicca, impermanence, dukkhang, as I just mentioned, the Four Noble Truths, and anatta, non-self, or a sense of no substance, no eternal essence in things, but a fleeting nature. Anicca, dukkha, anatta, the three characteristics. That's also like one of the QC for any spiritual tradition to check through. Is it about impermanence, not self, and suffering, frustration, sorrow, pain, lamentation, grief, and despair? Or is it about like happiness on cloud number 9 or 7 or 108, with dolphins and crystals everywhere, and people getting blurry-eyed, but not doing the groundwork of breaking through to the truth about of life. So in one way, in the Thai forest tradition, as you know, we try to keep things a little bit on the level of being challenging, because these Four Noble Truths, like the way of approaching life, is meant to create insights in us, and that we see when we face suffering, frustration, or things that we don't get the way we like, and have to put up with the facts about existence in a very, say, kind of painful way. So it's not that we're inflicting particularly a special sort of ascetic practices on ourselves in order to suffer extremely, but there's a certain balance to have suffering appear in one's practice, in one's life, such that we can derive insights from it. And I think that's also like one of the trademarks of the forest tradition and the Ajahn Chah way of teaching, is that there's always a sense of little making things a bit difficult, or a bit physically challenging, for example. So, for example, if it gets a bit cold now, or like if there's some noise or like whatever discomfort while we're here, then it's actually well intended. It's actually good for us. So the amount of scriptural studies that Luang Por Chah had integrated into his own, say, kind of curriculum before he became a forest monk, before he went to practice out in the wild, was basic. It's the Thai tradition upcountry for even the normal monasteries in small towns or so is not on the level of a very, say, kind of elaborate analysis of the teachings. And in many ways these days we have much more access, even as lay people, or like as monks as well, to all kinds of sources of understanding of what the Buddha taught. And there's a lot of benefits to that as well. We can understand certain, say, implications of the teachings in a deep way, see the historic side of it, and relate it to other areas such as modern science, or theories of how to live in society. And this is very important as well, and very inspiring in one way. But we have to be careful that we don't take off too much into abstract things, and that we don't get too much, as Ajahn Chah mentioned in one of his Dhamma talks, empty scripture knowledge. There's a little Dhamma talk that he gave a while ago, in one of the collected teachings, Tucho Potila, which is it's about a monk who's just quoting the scriptures and book knowledge, more or less, but wasn't able to kind of integrate it into his whole, say, way of being, and possibly very, very far away from realizing those truths in a direct way, such that it can alleviate suffering. It's maybe gratifying to have a lot of knowledge about the world, a lot of knowledge about history, a lot of knowledge about philosophy, and also a lot of knowledge about Buddhism. So in one way, Luang Por Chah many times, and the forest tradition presently, many times looks down a bit on the academic side of studies. Whereas in one way or the other, we all have like a certain access to the Buddha's teachings through having read them, having come to them, particularly myself and many of us in Wat Banana Chat. We first met the Buddha, I would say, maybe on tourist trips, maybe a little bit, going to Southeast Asia or Sri Lanka, India, and or like pictures or so in art books and so forth. But mainly having inquired through the libraries, books, and shops, and get a copy of the teachings of the Buddha, translated into English language or German language or whatever is around, and we read it and we kind of analyze it and think, yeah, this is reasonable, this is correct, this is like a wonderful philosophy. And many of the people from Europe, America, Australia, they understand that the Buddha's teachings actually is not a religion in that sense. It's more like a philosophy. And that's for them a good disclaimer that they're not getting into something occult or strange or metaphysical with like lots of assumption. And it's for Germans particularly, it's a praise to be reasonable and rational. It's a very good thing. But when we come to our own lives and the challenges, old age, sickness and death, or stuff that happens in our daily life, we get angry at other people and we get dismissive around people that we think aren't good enough or behaving incorrectly, or so we get righteous or so. These things that many times fueled by a wrong taking of right view, like a righteousness and a knowing this shouldn't be like this, and a sort of idealism, which is also has got a long history in particularly in Germany and in the West, idealistic thinking. Whereas like the Buddha's teachings, they're down to earth, they're right there in that sense that we can see directly what is happening. We're coming back to a present moment experience, and what we then mainly see is imperfection. Things aren't perfect, they're not the way they should be. Like there's always something lacking, the world is always insatiated, it's always like not perfect. And these are simple ways of looking at life and having an attitude of learning and understanding through a premise that is very much emphasized in the forest tradition, seeing the imperfection of things, seeing that it's frustrating, it's not the way it's supposed to be, people aren't perfect, and also ourselves, we're not perfect. We're actually supposed to practice a certain sense of humility and humbleness. When we practice the Buddha's teachings, we're not like there in terms of our pride and self and I know it all, I can explain it to everybody, but we're actually taking these humble lessons of life, say for example something not being quite all right in our surroundings, say, or like being responsible for an error that we made and being able and having to live with that, like having messed up a situation or so. These are frustrations that we have to come to terms with. So these are all things that are emphasized in the forest tradition, and with Ajahn Chah living in the monasteries that he shaped, and such as like our monastery in Thailand, in Wat Banana Chat, like where we come together with many different, very, say, eager and keen lives from many nations, trying to do the right thing. We have to constantly rub each other and smooth each other out and come back to a sense of appreciation and understanding of causes and conditions, rather than the idealist way. It shouldn't be like this. This is supposed to be the strict forest tradition. This is supposed to be the a meditation monastery. Why is it so loud? Why is there no time for it? Why is like everybody always into ceremonies? What's happening here? These kind of criticisms come up easily. Whereas like when we think back to the simple teachings of letting go, letting things be, accepting imperfections, accepting ourselves as not being perfect, not fault finding with other people, then we're actually really right in the center of what I think what Ajahn Chah would like us to integrate into our practice. So the topic of reflecting on the teachings is still there, a very important part of our practice, and particularly coming from a background of liking books and liking to think about things, liking also to translate things inevitably. We're second, third, fourth, fifth, 100th generation after the Buddha. We have to build a bridge and put in effort, like really to get into the teachings and find out in a certain way what, for example, even the word dukkha, what does it mean? So it's not an easy task, and I do appreciate if there are people around that study Pali, study Sanskrit, know how to express these things well, and the eloquence of a good Dhamma teacher that is well studied, is well learned, Bahusuttang, well studied, is a gain, of course. But we don't hold on to this as the one and only way. That's very important. And when we do the practice, sometimes we have the other extreme of the spectrum of what the mind is able to do, is like to completely let go, be silent, be focused, be absolutely still in mind. That's one of the ideals we try to live up to when we meditate. The other times we're thinking, we're judging, we're analytical, we're critical, we're more or less like used to analyze and contemplate whatever we're doing, kind of discussing it constantly in our mind. So between those two poles, there's some middle way as well. So at times we can be empty in our mind and just dwell in the mere experience of mainly watching our breath, feeling the present moment, and experiencing a sense of peace coming up in our hearts and making us feel very grounded and present. At other times we cannot, because we've just come from an argument, or we've just come from an unsatisfactory situation. We've just had a sense of overdoing something, for example, overeating, playing with games, and I don't know what else there is online or so. When we've come from a quite agitated environment, so somewhere in the middle there's a way of trying to build a bridge between our worldly activity of thinking, talking, analyzing, having this slightly idealist way of it should be like that, like program or project oriented, and then coming back to the absolute sense of deflation, letting things be and sitting down, having nothing but the breath. So many of us are coming to the monastery. We come to the monastery as if it was meditation retreat, where we just kind of come in there and push the button, retreat, bang, and there we are, silence. But we may be able to do that for a while, but like real life comes up, say, too loud here, too much noise here, why is there so much smell, why are there so many mosquitoes, what's the guy beside me doing, who was snoring this morning? You can have all these kind of thoughts. Or, like come back to real life sooner or later, and also see ourselves that like after a very fulfilling, peaceful chunk of meditation, there may be the opposite, like we may be completely frustrated because we cannot get it back, and we're not able to maintain it many times. And one way is the approach is just do it and plow through, and may it come if I don't give up. This also is part of the forest tradition, to really go for the aim without stopping. And many times there are periods where we can do this. I can actually have like weekend reserved for that, where we say we're having a very disciplined way of making the boundaries very clear. We're sitting now, we're not budging, we're not going anywhere, we're practicing sense restraint, for example, we're not talking, we're only eating very little, so forth. We can have a certain period where we do this, and I do believe that it is necessary for the practice to have periods where one naturally puts all one's money on one horse, which is like being still, not doing anything. And whereas on other times, and then we have the difficulties of integrating our usual daily life. And I believe you being in Delhi, it's not easy to integrate that and live with those two poles of wishing stillness, peace, bliss, liberation, and at the same time being bound up with all kinds of stuff and agitated. Similarly, in the monastery, over time, it comes just naturally that it's not always peaceful. So then I find using reflective meditation is a very good way. Also suits my personal nature, I've been used to thinking a lot, so to tell yourself, just stop thinking, I can do that with an act of will for a certain amount of time. But I also believe that actually it is a valid path that our teachers use. And I also believe it has an ingredient to quite a high level in the Buddha's own way of teaching, and it's not something that the Buddha dismissed. When we think about the life of the Savakas and Savikas, how some of them realized the Dhamma through an act of contemplating the teachings. There's so many stories in the suttas where simple phrases of the teachings presented to them at the right time suddenly had a huge effect on their mind, and sometimes it takes them all the way to final liberation. And so we have to find out what works for us to keep us inspired, keep us uplifted, and have a sense of genuine applications of the teachings and trying to integrate them into our present situation, not only the situation in a meditation retreat setting, but also in a situation of daily life challenges. And I found using those chantings that we do an excellent bridge and of giving us reflections in a very condensed way. And when we chanted this morning, we did one of the standard programs that we do every day in the monastery. And I know many lay people in Ubon, in our town, that come to the monastery also keep this practice up when they're at home. And it's not meant as a mere devotional practice where you kind of worship deity or associations that many Christians have, say a prayer where you wish for things, or but it's a real panya-based reflection. Panya meaning wisdom, and where while we're chanting, we're going back to the basic teachings of the Lord Buddha and trying to keep our mind just on the essence of these teachings. It's not a small thing. How many times do we even chant automatically, forget where we are, forget one kanda out of 5, and so forth. Go Buddhang, Dhammang, Sanghang, Namasami, and forget one of those 3 triple gems. It's happened to me many times, and mindlessness comes in. So we got to be careful, sorrow, and applying our mind with awareness while we're doing these chants. It's not not a mere, say, lip service. I, don't want to kind of look down on other religions, but I do know, or I've heard about say in many religions, the mere ritual is something that's cleansing. The number of prostrations, the hours that you do your prayers, or the direction you pray to, and so forth. Eventually these things in Buddhism, they don't really count. It's like it's not essential to do that much of chanting, or to do 100,000, say, itipiso chants or so. It's not like guaranteed for liberation. So in that sense, we're not chanting. We're chanting in order to teach ourselves and to develop insight and have a mirror of what we're doing in confronted with the simple teachings of the Buddha, and we see what are we doing with that, and how do we relate to that. So that's why it's called reflection. Like it's like we're using reflection and we're taking the Buddha's teachings. So to say, what if we were to see the world under the paradigm of sabbe sankhara anicca, all conditioned things are impermanent? What if we were not working from that sense of it's mine, it's me, it's there forever, I've got a right to it, or so. So these are reminders, and and it's like the whole paradigm of the three characteristics, the Four Noble Truths. We have to drum it in constantly. We could go around with our mala beads and go dukkha, 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 dukkha. It's not very popular though. It's usually people use the mala beads for something very holy and exalted, and it's just kind of very. In fact, it's just when we chanted this morning after Buddha Dhamma Sangha Nusati, like recollection of the virtues of Buddha Dhamma Sangha, and then the passages that we continue with a sense of explaining the Four Noble Truths and elaborating on what the five khandhas are and what impermanence is a little bit. Afterwards, the short chants, I was thinking, I'm not quite sure whether people are okay with that, and chanting Marananusati, contemplation of death. Of course, it's well known. It's something that many religions talk about. But then the next one, we did Kayagatasati, like in a neutral way, but like Asubha is like the verdict. It's not just contemplation of the body, Kayagatasati, mindfulness of the body, but it's also there's a spin on it that the Buddha puts on and says that these 32 parts of the body are not beautiful. They're asubhic, as we say in the monastery. They're ugly. They're disgusting, repulsive. So this is like where you divide already a bit, like between hardcore Buddhists and people that are just there for a sense of well-being and relaxation. Sometimes in the monastery, this is like also another hallmark of the forest tradition. Is like to do contemplation of the body in that way of seeing the revulsive side of the body. So this is like, I was just thinking, are we ready for this in our group here? And I thought, never mind, I can explain later. So we've got a lot of things to talk about: Asubha Kammatthana, body contemplation, and then the third chant that we did then was the Sabbe Sankhara Anicca, Anicca Nusati, Anicca Patang, where we talk about like impermanence that also kind of carries on, like this body here will be tossed away and useless like a rock, like a rotten piece of wood. These are things like one has to already have a certain amount of right view to be able to integrate those into the practice, and I wouldn't be able to talk to that too freely with my own relatives back in Germany, where religion is something that is like a glorification of divine powers, heaven realms. The aim of religion is paradise. What do we say as Buddhists to that? It's anicca, yeah? Paradise is anicca, sorry. You had it for a while, then you have to go back down to earth. Or like just reminds me like heaven and hell, these basic teachings of the Lord Buddha, right view, worldly right view, like where we start with like a sense of karma, say the round of rebirth, the various planes of existence that I believe many of you from an Indian background will be able to relate to that easily, but in Germany, America, Australia, the US, it's very, very dangerous grounds to touch. Heaven is fine. I mean, if it's kind of partial for that part, but like hell, it's something. It's just like taboo almost. You don't talk about hell. Whereas, like, I just had my sister visiting in Wat Banana Chat, and they went on a little tour. And they were prompted by one of those tourist guides. They took them to one of the temples where, of course, there's like pictures of hell realms, like people being tortured and having to kind of climb up a cactus type of tree. And do they have many of those in Nepal? So I shouldn't laugh about it, but like it is like one of the suttas to avoid when doing sutta discussions with in a Western educated audience is like the Balabandita Sutta about like the wardens of hell and things like that. So we have to explain a lot about these things and about planes of existence, the negative sides of life. Whereas a Buddhism that emphasizes blissful states of mind, exalted states of mind, peace, well-being, relaxation, is well received, of course, everywhere, all over the world. So using Asubha Kammatthana and the unwished for things to be looked at is part of like where we really generate wisdom, where we really generate a feeling of like penetrating to the things that are facts of life, rather than kind of carefully evading them and trying to kind of live in a dream world. So this is part of the forest tradition as well, to contemplate the 32 parts of the body in and out, and using particularly this chant in order to remind oneself and in order to reiterate how one's own body is not attractive and not intrinsically beautiful, or say kind of like to go beyond the sensual and sexual attraction of human bodies. It's not a small step, and it's a major breakthrough in the practice to be able to be neutral, let's say, towards gender issues, male and female, see it what it really is, like in a very neutral way. So it's not a small thing. The Buddha's wisdom is really deep in these things, and it's a very simple thing about like one's own body, one's own attractiveness, and other people's body, other people's attractiveness. So we use this on and on and on, and teach ourselves and try to remind ourselves. So recollection or reflection is many times about reminding ourselves of the simple facts that we may have read and may have heard and may have intellectually grasped. And so this is a big chunk of the practice, to be able to test oneself about subha or asubha, beauty and unbeauty, or heaven and hell. So then in our chants, the last part was the happy end chant, the Brahma viharas. This is like basic psychology, like we always do that at the end of the meditation, at the end of like a teaching. We end in a way that is bound to get people motivated and feel intuitively reunited with like our inner wish for peace and happiness, and one of the vehicles of all religions is like Brahma viharas, or the positive qualities, ethical qualities like loving kindness, compassion, generosity, and all these things that are present in all good religions. Is like a sense of sharing, a sense of dedication, well-wishing, appreciative joy, and also kind of devotional good energy that comes with that. And whereas the ending of our chanting session ended with upeka, that's just like a little footnote, like we didn't end in the heaven realms in that sense. We ended with upeka, which is equanimity, which again is like a special trait of the Buddha's teachings, is that the Buddha doesn't just teach the divine abidings as commonly seen as like positive states of mind, like loving kindness, appreciative joy, compassion, but he also teaches to have a sense of equanimity or utter peace. And this is sometimes the conundrum that we have to work through, is like how does neutrality and evenness of mind or equanimity feel? And then we're back to our meditation. Then we're aiming at not having that inner dialogue about good and bad, but like having just simple peace with things. So, like the chants that we did are just the regular ones we usually do. We had a small version of our chanting book before at Wat Pananacha, which Ajahn Rochanomi memorized from the very start, like the main teachings, morning and evening chanting, praise of Buddha Dhamma Sangha, Marananusati, contemplation of death, Asubha Kamatana, and Brahma viharas. And these are actually, it's not a coincidence, these are called the Araka Kamatana. These are the guardian meditations, and they're well used in the forest tradition. Then we started getting more into the actual curriculum, as one can say, of Wat Pa Pong. Wat Pa Pong, Ajahn Chah's monastery's got a bigger chanting book. And us coming from the West with lots of kind of book knowledge and little devotional faculties, more or less, we thought we don't need all this chanting. But having then got in touch with the tradition more and more, realize actually what they're chanting over there in Wat Pa Pong with Ajahn Chah is really cool stuff. It's not just like happy together, devotional energy, bhakti, shakti, cloud number 9. It's actually like you can see in the small chanting book that we in the bigger chanting book that we have now. Like it's got all the core teachings, like Anapanasati Sutta, and also the Noble Eightfold Path, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, and various other little bits and pieces. So I believe, even though we're not a pariyatti tradition with like a scholarly background, through chanting the Pali lines, having them translated in a convenient language for us, and doing this on a daily basis or like weekly basis, we roughly cover everything. Then we constantly have this mirror of reflection for ourselves. Are we actually practicing in the right direction? Is there a sense of deviating from the Four Noble Truths? Is there a sense of deviating from the Noble Eightfold Path? Are we incorporating the right, instructions for meditation? Sometimes when we use a discursive way of meditating, for example, going through a chant in our mind for a whole hour or so, sometimes we're actually a bit fed up with that kind of like thinking process as well. And this is one of the benefits as well from doing the reflective meditations. There comes a point where actually the desire to just be still and let it all sink in comes in. And this is what I feel is like where we're not missing out on the element of meditation that goes into the direction of samatha, of being quiet and peaceful and going inward while we're doing the reflection, is that after some time of contemplation, reflection, naturally the mind is in a state where it feels, now it's good enough, now I've had enough of my mental food, just want to relax, and then we can just kind of go to the breath. So it's not exclusive to use reflective meditations. it's like it's integrating, and it's a good tool, I would say. George, some contemplations on it? So yeah, like I've said quite a bit now. I'd like to take some questions. Yeah, if there's anything you'd like to directly ask, otherwise I can keep talking.
यदि कोई प्रश्न पूछना चाहें तो पूछ सकते हैं, हिंदी में ही पूछेंगे, सामने महापन्यों है, ट्रांसलेट कर देंगे.
On the occasion in Bodh Gaya just now, being in a group of Tipitaka chanters was the occasion, where they recite the Pali scriptures in quite a comprehensive way. They go through the whole Tipitaka, and it's a group effort to chant these things. I was quite taken by the amount of recurrent phrases that are familiar for somebody who's done a bit of like basic chanting and memorizing teachings that like we know from the suttas and from our practice, and they occur in so many places of the Tipitaka, and it's quite uplifting it's almost like meeting an old friend, and you get some of the Pali phrases. I believe it's easy for you to chant things in Pali, or to recite them, or memorize them in Pali. For us, it's a difficult thing to gradually get used to. But even though I myself, or Ajahn Rochano and Samani Mahapanyo, and we're not really versed in Pali, when we see these phrases and the words of the Buddha in its original language, we gradually learn more about their meaning through keeping our eyes and ears open and applying them and asking about them and inquiring about them. And sometimes the scholarly aspects, they are useful. Sometimes we think that's over the top, that's just causing me too much worries and headaches. And sometimes it's good to go back to saying, I don't fully know yet, I'm still experiencing what the word this word means, but it's an ongoing process. And just being in Bodh Gaya when the Tripitaka chanting was taking place, I realized, there's a quality of gradually exploring the teachings in this way. We start with one thing that's meaningful for us, and it opens up a whole world. That's also very, very inspiring to experience. For example, the 32 parts of the body part that we were isolating as a chant, Tavating Sakara Patang, is actually part of the Satipatthana Sutta, as of course you well-versed Satipatthana practitioners know. It is part of the Satipatthana Sutta, and it's something we usually take the sampajanya aspect more than anything, like walking back and forth, fletching our limbs, standing, walking, sitting, and eating, speaking, and so forth. The mindfulness while doing things, like say, for example, It's emphasized in the Burmese tradition very much, like when people do walking meditation, that sense of like taking a tiny part of the instructions of the body contemplation from the Satipatthana Sutta as a main practice. And similarly, like in the forest tradition, we take the 32 parts of the body as one of the main practices for ourselves. So when we use the reflective meditations, the most common one to start with is the Buddha Dhamma Sangha Anusati. This is like the most grounding and very obviously the first way of approaching a reflective meditation is to reflect on the Lord Buddha, reflect on the teaching, and reflect on the Sangha. And reflection on the Buddha, living in India, you've got much access to it. You can very well relate to the Buddha as a historic person, a human being, having lived here and being born here, having attained enlightenment here, and having reached utter sensation, freedom from rebirth in this area of the world. So it's a very uplifting thing to think about the Buddha as a realized, accomplished human being. And this is something when we do meditation in the forest tradition, we many times use the meditation word Buddho, Buddho, just simply as a marker of the breath. So the breath doesn't become just simply, say, too boring. We have a little word that we say. We can say it's a mantra. In Thailand they say, like parikama, like a meditation word, like we use the word Buddho, Buddho, and there's something to it when we use the word Buddho or Buddha, because it really appeals to our, say, faith in the Lord Buddha. And I've heard that the Christians in Thailand use Jesus, Yesu, Haicha Khao Ye, Haicha Ok Ye, Su, in breath Ye and out breath Su. We can use any word actually. And before, in living in Berlin, I used to be part of a Zen group. We did counting meditation, which is a very, very good tool as well. And as we know, the Zen philosophy more or less very much about seeing conventions and liberation in the same light, and so mathematicians can take 1 till 10 and devote Buddhists one Buddho, but it should be interchangeable. It should actually not matter once we have mindfulness and are aware of the faculty of knowing which is generated while we're looking at the breath, then actually the insight and the openness for the truths about life is nothing that has to do with the particular way that we were, the particular tool that we got into this state of knowing and awareness. It's these reflective meditations, or the meditation techniques, they're tools, they're ways of making us change our way of our state of mind, our awareness, to be opening up the sense of knowing and seeing, understanding, being awake, and being in the West we say the word enlightening ourselves, and so many times when we use the meditation word Buddho, it carries that sense of this is a reminder: be awakened, be awake, be alert, be the one who knows, be a knower, be like the Buddha, have the quality of knowledge, vision, understanding, and awareness. And Luang Por Sumedho would say consciousness, to be able to swap the mind that is hooked up with particulars and attached to certain things in our normal daily life awareness, and transcend to a sense of higher awareness, not to be caught up with things, but to lift up the mind to the sense of knowing, being aware, being awakened. So this is not meant as a claim. It's not that every time when we think Buddho, and we get an uplift of a feeling, now I'm opening up my awareness, I'm the Buddha. And this would be heretic even in the Thai forest tradition, which is very liberal in many ways. But we don't really think that we are the Buddha, of course, but we try to take the quality and try to take the example. Again, it's a tool to make a shift in our mind and make a shift in our heart to expand our average caught up little sense of I, my, me, and to the quality of knowing and awareness. So Luang Por Chah, many times he said, like, when you practice Buddho, you practice to be the one who knows, be knowing. And in the way Luang Por Sumedho translated, it's this funny English word, like being the knowing. It's something actually, I think he shaped the language a little bit with that. It's not like something usually you would say. It's a Dhamma language way of saying being the knowing. The knowing is a way in the West to make a noun out of it, which is impersonal. Whereas in the Thai language, this doesn't really exist. There is not a culture or like a language history of making a noun out of things. It's always very, very direct. There is somebody who does something, or so. It's a not otherworldly or transcendental, idealistic way of looking at life. It's already very direct with like. One person does this, one person does that, one being does this, that, and that. So in Thai, we have the expression to be the one who knows, which, again, one could say, take it as a conundrum. Who is the one who knows? Like, you can ask yourself that. But the idea of going back to the roots of Buddho while using the meditation word Buddho or Buddha is to shift one's awareness to the perspective of consciousness, rather than being caught up with the particulars and caught up with the sense of grasping at an experience in a particular way, but lifting the mind up to being the observer, having the observing qualities. So when we use Buddho, it can be Buddhanusati, it can be like going directly into the beautiful human being that lived 2,600 years ago in this part of the world, and taking the direct example of the Lord Buddha. But it can also be the more abstract way of looking at the quality of awareness and be a reminder of the quality of Buddha being. You probably know much more about these roots of Sanskrit. Isn't that one of those main root words, bu, like a quality of knowing and the essence of knowing, to go into that into a mode of dwelling in a perspective that is beyond the normal, average worldly way of seeing things, which happens when we watch the breath and we're more dwelling in the consciousness around the breath, rather than trying to be something, get something, force things or so. We let go and lift the mind up to a sense of presence. So this is two aspects of meditation on when we do Buddho, and particularly when we're fighting with the hindrances, for example, becoming sleepy or so, we can take again the model and the particular example as a tool. Thinking about the Buddha sitting meditation, the Buddha, particularly in the iconography of I say the Buddha images. The Buddha is always like an embodiment of a very, very alert posture, a way of like, say, a beauty of like in a sense of like you feel that there's an alertness and awakeness when we look at the Buddha images, for example, or many times the Buddha image is depicted with a flame on the top. That's some particular Thai trait, I think. But it helps sometimes to just like lift yourself up and sit meditation like the Buddha, more or less. Like at least like we believe that the Buddha was sitting very, very present, very beautiful, alert, and straight. And these things they can also be very, very helpful as a tool to overcome the hindrances when we're sitting meditation and falling asleep or thinking about all kinds of things, to go back to the quality of presence, awareness, being straight, and being very, very like almost like uplifting yourself. Like so, this is the Buddha. Can talk, keep talking. Usually we have the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. So whatever I share is like a bit of like my own little say kind of like collection of things that would work for me in certain situations. And if we have that general outlook of keeping the core Dhamma teachings present in our practice, I think we can experiment to a certain level and be creative, particularly when things are like difficult, when the meditation becomes automatic, or we have little time and we have to swap from a very agitated lifestyle to a very quiet meditation session. Then I think it's very good to use that creative approach and use it to keep our mind in the Dhamma, keep the mind not going to the world, not going to the self or like our identity, things that we love and hate, but broadening the whole perspective. And I think one can say we're usually not very fond of thinking while we're meditating. We try to abandon and let things be and not judge things or so. But if we have to think, then let's think in this reflective way and have it as a tool for the Dhamma, or think within the Dhamma. Any thoughts are fine if they're Dhamma. It's just very, very simple. Kind of whatever Dhamma we have, it may be at least like say, if we're not able to use a technique like that counting technique to the level that it brings us to that awareness, because it gets too mechanical and we're too agitated or so, and we're just hooked up with the technique somehow, then we fill it with life, and in that sense we fill it with Dhamma, we fill it with an investigative quality, and this is like one of the factors of awakening, actually. Like it's not just like something that we use as a skillful means or so. It's explicitly Dhamma Vichaya is like is a bojjhanga, is a factor of awakening. And if we can perfect that reflectivity and have it present whenever the eye sees something, the ear hears something, and so forth, whenever we are in contact with the world, and if we have the right Dhamma response to it, it'll be part of the awakening of our, say, fulfillment in the Dhamma. So it's not wasted time in that sense that we're merely doing brain activity. And we feel it from ourselves, whether something is happening in our heart, whether we're actually experiencing an uplift while we're contemplating, while we're going through a chant in our mind, and we can feel it happening every now and again. For example, if we are chanting the chants on metta, it becomes very, very obvious for most of us, like whether we're actually really sensing, generating metta, loving kindness, or whether we're just going through the notions and we're doing lip service. Asupa is also, of course, similar effect somehow, and there are moments where we really we're clear. This is true. Like we're doing this in an authentic way, and there's I believe these are small insights that we can have while we're applying these tools, contemplating the Dhamma. It's maybe not the one and only breakthrough that we need for like complete realization, but there are bits and pieces. It's like a supporting factor for ourselves to have the whole Dhamma experience come together. And so it's not a waste of time to use the investigation and the generation of thoughts around anicca, dukkha, anatta. And we can feel whenever we have a feeling of the Dhamma taking over in our practice, then we can also kind of try to remember this and be able to come back to this feeling, just like when we know. If we genuinely feel metta in certain situations, feel compassion, feel a sense of sangveka, like a sense of dispassion and an urge to do something good. For example, when you see an innocent beggar or like a crippled kid or so, or like a wounded dog, you get this sense of karuna, compassion, and an instinct, and we know it's true, and we can come back to that sense and of what did we feel, and this image or the say the trigger of that Dhamma being generated in our hearts. I think this is many times what people do in guided meditations. They say, for example, a very popular way of doing meditation in the West is to have a guided meditation where the teacher tells you about like certain things that are meaningful and say kind of inspiring, and like it can be anything from say images that arouse a sense of metta, or like body explorations and things like that. And you can have a guided meditation, somebody leading you towards the images that are very commonly arousing a certain aspect of the Dhamma in the mind, in the heart. And we can start with our own collection. For example, having metta, we can think of like things that are really arousing the sense of wishing well to other beings. We can have similar thoughts around old age, sickness, death, for example. Like say, can use those little pointers to generate and to trigger a Dhamma feeling in our hearts. And at the same time, if we collect more and more of meaningful practices that work for us in a certain situation, we can go back to those as well and recollect them and revisit those experiences. This is something that is included in the word sati, and sati being not only present moment, mindfulness also being a sense of recollection, being a sense of keeping in mind, for example, keeping death in mind, marananusati. We come back to a thought of death, we come back to possibly an incident where we lost a relative or where we saw somebody in the last moment of his life. Many times we just put it in the trash bin, go on with life, like not even recycle bin, just kind of delete and go on with life, like forget that my grandmother died, for example. I was giving Mahapanyo the socks that my grandmother knitted just a year before she died just now. So I thought, wow, yeah, it was very touching for me to hear when she died. Why am I not keeping the sense of Sangvega? So this is part of like recollection, reflective meditation, is to go back to things that have worked, that have uplifted the heart already once in a very direct way, and come back to that experience and link it without forcing it, but linking it, making it conscious and bringing it up in many situations where we are practicing. So these are just a few reflections. I think it's almost time for the meal now, and I don't mind just talking if you don't find it too boring. But if there's anything that comes up that you'd like to ask, there'll be opportunities to check in on particular things about the teachings or about the reflections, or so can continue. There's a lot more I can just kind of elaborate on, like having been doing these chants for quite a while, and trying to keep them alive. But these reflections, they're things that work for myself, so you have to be careful, not like just like copying these things. You have to, like, everybody has to collect his own way of reflecting that really works, in one's own set of little tools, recollections that work. So I offer this for reflection for this morning. Okay, so the generous donors have offered food down below for us, and I'd like to go down and take the food and give the blessing and the Anumodana chant down below, so we can pay respects to Buddha Dhamma Sangha together, and then go downstairs.